First up is a film called The Substance, and this is a body horror film. It's written and directed by Coralie Farge, and body horror, not my genre. Horror in general, not my genre if you listen to my reviews, but I'd heard excellent things, and this film has haunted me since, in a variety of ways. It stars Demi Moore, and she plays a character called Elizabeth Sparkle, who is very famous and builds a fitness empire, think Jane Fonda-esque, and, is starting to hit a certain age, and the powers that be / marketing, etc., played by, the embodiment of those powers is played by Dennis Quaid, who, is the perfect casting choice for this in many senses. This film is brilliantly cast. So, Dennis Quaid / the network / executives, etc., are basically phasing her out, and of course she is frustrated. I sense that Demi Moore has had a lifetime to prepare for this role, as most women of, again, a certain age have, and that's not to say old, it's just to say a certain age. Anyway, so the character of Elizabeth Sparkle is presented with an opportunity to take the substance, and all of this is in the trailers. Stick with me here. So with the substance, it gives you the opportunity to make a better, more, flawless you. The catch, I would say, is that it's, you're sharing yourself. So it's 1 week on, 1 week off, and you have to strike the balance. The younger, flawless version of her is played by Margaret Qualley, and again, credit to Coralie for really just smart casting across the board. The two play two sides of the same coin in a really balanced and thoughtful way. So, you've got Demi Moore, who is simultaneously happy to have this, opportunity again. And then Margaret Qualley playing Sue is what the other persona is called. And Sue is just as ambitious as young Elizabeth Sparkle was. So what happens from there? Again, like I said, body horror. If you are squeamish, you are going to cover your eyes a lot, which is what I did a considerable amount during this film. The performances are, I think, really, really well balanced. The challenge with it is that it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I think it gets a little self-indulgent and kind of bloated towards the center, and so I'm like, okay, kind of move it along. If this film had been exactly 2 hours, I'd been like, this is the best movie of the year. I mean, maybe not, but, it definitely left an impression, like I said. I think anybody who has experienced frustration at beauty standards or societal norms expecting something of them, and not fitting a mold, or just being like, I am talented, or I am skilled, or I am whatever, like, why is this other thing holding me back, is going to relate to this movie. I think women in particular, or female identifying folks, are going to relate to this movie. Again, there's a lot of body in the body horror, sometimes to the almost self-indulgent point. There's intentionally male gazy moments when we are, seeing Sue and her beautiful, flawless body, etc. And that contributes, I think, to the bloat a little bit, where we're like, okay, we get it. You have established the point. We are no longer progressing the story. We can move along here. The ending of this film, and I'm not going to say what it is unhinged. It is a chaotic, just like crescendo of what the heck is happening here. I remember I was sitting next to somebody I did not know during, and we just kept looking at each other like, what's going on? In that sense, this is a weird one to watch with a group of people, especially, in a shared experience, because there will be like uhs and reactions to different points. Somebody at one point just like cackled at something, and all of us did not get what she was cackling at, but I'm glad that she had that experience. But it's an odd one to watch in a communal experience because it is just very in your face. I will, if you are somebody who experiences public like discomfort or, secondhand embarrassment, you might need to wait till this comes out on streaming. If you are super grossed out by this type of thing, like, I think this film is really good. So if it's at the edge of your boundaries, it's one of those few times where I'm gonna be like, yeah, maybe push your boundaries a little bit. If body's being sewn up, and again, this is not a spoiler. If that is a hard no, like vomit inducing for you, you cannot see this movie. I'm so sorry. But yeah, like I said, this is one of those few times where I'm like, yeah, you should test your limits a little bit for it. It is long. As I said, that is my main criticism of it, and the parts that are repetitive and self-indulgent are unfortunately some of the weaker parts for me, where I'm just like, you've made your point in terms of, cool, we get it, she's sexy. But aside from that, Demi Moore, so good in this. And Margaret Qualley is great, but this is Demi Moore's story, and like I said, there are other actresses, I think, who could play this role. I don't want to, and this is not a knock on Demi Moore, but I do think she does bring like just a frustration to it that I have to commend. So I'm going to give The Substance a 3.9 out of 5. The next film I have this week is called A Different Man, and this is effectively a double feature, and I saw this as a double feature, so it was a very strange situation. They are not a double feature, but in terms of stories about transformation, they are kindred in many senses, and, transformation and then following it up with regret. So A Different Man stars Sebastian Stan, and he plays a man called Edward, and he's somewhat disfigured. He's an aspiring actor, and then he ends up undergoing a medical procedure that ends up transforming his appearance, and then he turns into Sebastian Stan. But then, again, all in the descriptions and the trailers, a dream role comes up for a character that, it would make sense for them to be disfigured, and suddenly he is not right for the part, and again, frustration and regret are the themes of these two movies. Now, The Substance stayed with me in a more, I don't know if positive is a way, but a constructive way, I think, than A Different Man did. I think Sebastian Stan does a good job. There are kind of stylistic choices in it that I'm like, I don't want to say I'm confused by, because I understand what they were doing, but the way that certain characters behave and speak is very stylized, and I sometimes find it a little off-putting. Renata Rensive is in it, and sadly, she is one of my favorite actresses right now, and this is applicable to her character. I don't know if it's just like English is a second language or accented English scenario, but the way her character is written, I think, is what it actually comes down to, is like, it feels inauthentic, and I know this is not a spoiler, but that's like part of the character, but it's a hard watch. And then the end, much like The Substance, I understand how we got to the end of A Different Man is just like, what's going on here? It also stars Adam Pearson, who is an actual actor who is, has a facial difference. I don't know what the correct terminology here is, but has a facial difference. So I think some of the discussion and the meta-ness of the film of like who should be playing what is relevant to it, but it kind of comes up so late in it that I was like, okay. Sebastian Stan gives a good performance. It's hard not to compare the two just because I saw them back to back and I'm talking about them back to back. I think in terms of authenticity, Demi Moore's character arc is better written and performed, but they're not the same film, right? This is not a body horror, I will say that, so you should be fine in that sense, but I don't think this is as strong a film. It's worth seeing, but if you had to pick between the two, I would suggest The Substance. If you are open to seeing both, I think this has interesting themes it's grappling with, especially as a follow-up, so I'm going to give this a 3.7 out of 5. The last film I have this week is called His Three Daughters, and it is now out streaming on Netflix, and it stars Natasha Lyonne, Elizabeth Olsen, and Carrie Coon, which is, a trifecta of super strong actresses. Now, I think the challenge with this one is that I would have loved to see this as a play. I think the live theater aspect of it, that's not to say it is a play, but if I'd seen it in the setting of a live theater, I think I would have overlooked some of the stylistic choices. It's one of those films that's limited to a few locations. It doesn't necessarily take advantage of the medium of film and being flexible. That's not to say every film has to do that. You could have a film that's amazing and set in one location and et cetera, but I think just the way that the characters behave towards each other and the acting choices here, and this is going to be a Carrie Coon comment, made it feel like this should have been better on stage. The story is three very different sisters come together because their father is about to pass, and they are confronted with being in the same space. They're staying at his apartment while he is basically in hospice and end of life care. This is also, there's no fun to be had in this movie, and not that every movie should be fun, but it is a very depressing film. And I saw this, unfortunately, a few days after I went to, the funeral for someone who had experienced like an extended end of life care. And so I was just like, I don't need to listen to this and like relive this because I have just been living this, but I will give it credit that it was authentic in portraying that. But if you are not in an emotional space to be dealing with, that sort of kind of like hanging on sense, this is not the film for you. Like I said, I think the performances are, Natasha Lyonne of the three of them, I think was the, maybe it's because it's the character I related to the most, but I think she also gives the strongest performance. Carrie Coon, I love Carrie Coon, but she was giving me her character on the Gilded Age in terms of like pitter patter and bossiness and all this stuff. And I know she doesn't always use that kind of inflection and accent because, in the Ghostbusters movies, she does not sound like that. So I was just like, oh, Carrie, we can do different roles. It's fine. Elizabeth Olsen she gives a good performance in it. I think her character is maybe like the most neutral of them, and therefore her character also does not come across the strongest of the three of them, but credit to her for playing what, I'm sure they're like, oh, they're all lead roles. I'm like, no, it's a supporting role. I want to give a shout out to Jovan Adepo, who plays the boyfriend of Natasha Lyonne's character. He gets a few like really great moments, but yeah, this film was really depressing to watch. The performances are good, but they weren't good enough for me to be like, Yeah, you have to run out and watch this movie. If you need a cathartic synthesis of what you're feeling, and if you're like unable to articulate if you've gone through a similar thing recently, this film will basically do that for you. If you need to watch an extended family fight, and it felt like a very authentic family fight, but it's a family fight, great, this film is exactly for you. I, however, was maybe not in an emotional space to extra appreciate it, and it didn't go above and beyond in a way I was like, oh, yes, I'm so glad I saw all of these things, verbalized for me. So again, I would love to see this as a play, but as a film, because that's what it currently is, I'm going to give this a 3.7 out of 5. I think just because there are some really strong acting moments, it's just not consistent throughout because, and not to say the actresses are bad, but it feels like it's trying to go from like big beat to big beat and give it a capital A actor moments. And so the interludes just feel uneven comparatively. So 3.7 out of 5 for His Three Daughters.